academics were mocking the church for having this theology in the church that said that angels married women and out of that was born giants, and they just thought that was all cartoonish or mythological. And so the church invented the doctrine of the Sethites marrying the daughters of Adam, but it doesn't answer any of the questions. Why would a Sethite marrying a daughter of Adam give birth to a giant? So there's tons of questions around it, but the truth is, if you go back before the 3rd century, all of the church fathers, all of the Septuagint translators, all of the biblical scholars believed and even wrote about the story of Genesis 6 as being an advent in which these giants were produced as a result of fallen angels intermingling with women. So that's actually the ancient story, and the other was created for political reasons because the church was just simply trying to save face from their political counterparts. So, but anyway, that's what I believe. Now, what I started to say a moment ago, though, is that in addition to a mark of the beast type technology, I think there's another part of this that could be prophetic, and that is this happened in the days of Noah. But when our Lord's closest disciples said to him, Lord, what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the aeon, the end of the age? And he gave them various signs and then concluded in Matthew 24:37, saying, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it also be in the coming of the Son of Man. And guess what? For the first time since the days of Noah, we now have scientists all over the world that are once again doing only what one other time in history occurred, and that's mixing human and animal genetics for the purposes of creating a bizarre type of a body. So I personally think that we could be seeing now the fulfillment, the unfolding of biblical prophecy.
You know, I've come up with a few things I'd like to get your opinion on. One, I've said, isn't it possible that we've been in Armageddon for the last 100 years? We've had hundreds of millions of people die in wars all over the planet, but maybe the networks didn't tell us about it.
Well, we've certainly, no matter if it's amillennialistic or some other dispensational worldview, we certainly have had wars and rumors of wars, and yet the end hasn't yet come. So regardless, one way or the other, it is certainly a fulfillment of prophecy.
And we've talked on the show a little bit about the Council of Nicaea, and one of the thoughts that I've had is that at the Council of Nicaea, they promoted Jesus to God because they didn't want men like you or I aspiring to be the kind of man he was. Is that within their realm of possibility, or?
Hang on. Sorry. My personal belief is that Jesus was the incarnation of God. I don't have no problem with that doctrine whatsoever.
Okay. But he did say that you could do what I do and more. Didn't he?
Well, you keep in mind that what Christ was man. In other words, God, in the evangelical doctrine, as I believe it, he set aside deity, and he became God. He became God in flesh, but he did not use, in other words, that God side of him, the supernatural power or whatever, if you would. Like even when he commanded the waters of the ocean to be still, he did that as a man, but he did it as an unfallen man. So what this might, in fact, he's even referred to in the New Testament as the second Adam. So what this might attest to is what man was before the fall, what we originally were intended to be. And then if you think of it that way, then in the resurrection, in the world to come, really all it is a reclamation. All it is putting us back into the condition that we were before the fall, which would make sense because if God created everything the way he wanted it, he made man and then he stood back and he said, it is ta'ud, it is very good, it is exactly what I wanted it to be. Then, if in the resurrection man is not simply restored to what he once was, like Jesus was, as a man, but he could command He could say to a tree, no man eat fruit of thee from henceforth forevermore, and the tree would wither up and die. It says the stones would cry out. So he had this phenomenal power over nature itself. And when you imagine that when God created Adam and Eve, he placed them over the world and gave them the responsibility as custodians to take care of the whole world, they certainly had to be something far superior to what we are today. I mean, I can't even keep my lawn mowed, let alone, be the custodian of the whole world. You know what I'm saying? So in the resurrection, it seems to me that if it's not true that we're simply going to go back to what God created man to be, then what we're saying is that sin, or Satan, or Lucifer, or deception, or whatever, had the power to forever undo what God wanted. He made man, he said, perfect, it's what I want it to be. So, in the resurrection, in my opinion, we simply go back to being what man was created to be, and that was what you saw in Jesus Christ. You saw a person who was the incarnation of God, but had set aside deity to become a man. In fact, some of the deepest doctrine in Christianity about how he is our mercy seat in heaven is this idea, this fantastic idea, that in heaven right now there is a man. Not just God, in spirit form. In heaven right now there is a man who stands before the throne of God as our representation. This is fabulous doctrine if people can ever get past the superficial aspects of understanding the propitiation.
Now let me ask you about the reason I started the Free American years ago was after the attack on Waco and Randy Weaver. And I started the militias around the country and started the Free American to start investigating why this was happening. I got a chill when I heard George Bush say, now we see a new world coming into view. Henceforth we pledge allegiance to the New World Order. And I called the New World Order global government of the bankers, by the bankers, and for the bankers. How does this fit in with your research, your books? Are these people? I've also said that they have refined the art of slavery to the point that the slaves don't know they're slaves. I'm not a slave, man. I can go get my pickup and go get a beer. Watch. It's called economic slavery. Your chains are invisible, and I also speculate that maybe man was from the beginning, from thousands of years ago, was designed to be a worker, a miner, a farmer on this green planet in the universe. Your opinion?
Well, if I had to try to define what I am, I would have to say I'm a conservative libertarian. And it took me a long time to kind of figure that out because, I was a pastor for 25 years, and my doctrine's very conservative, very typical of, evangelical beliefs. But I also found that when I started the Raiders News Update years ago, and now it's Raiders News Update and also Raiders News Network, and it's grown to become the largest website of that kind in the world. When I started that, I found that I was always drawn to stories that had to do with the rights and liberties of the individual, and I was always frustrated, and I didn't care whose political party it was, if it was George Bush or Obama now, I didn't care. Whenever their actions tend to intrude into the freedoms of the individual, it makes me mad. And so for the longest time, I took heat because I was a former pastor for 25 years. I was also an executive in the largest evangelical institution in the world for some years. And so people then tend to stereotype a person like me that I'm going to, for instance, be very supportive of George W. Bush, but I wasn't. In fact, there was a lot of stuff that he did that made me very much upset me, and I was very public about it at Raiders News Network. Well, then this cost me some of my Christian friends. I mean, they just thought, wow, Tom's gone off the deep end. Something's wrong with him. He's lost his mind. He doesn't support or worship George W. Bush. And I couldn't. But you know what? Now a lot of them have come back because now I'm saying Obama's the biggest nightmare. Oh, now all of a sudden you've gained your senses again and you're back. And I'm saying you forget it. You don't get the bigger picture. But you know what I think it is about me? The truth is I grew up I grew up in the counterculture revolution, the hippies, Woodstock, and I remember the days before cell phones, before computers, before